All right, where we left off last time was we were moving the brain around to our current XY. We set up all the numbers up here for their XY positions. And we have a couple more things to do real quick. Delete some stuff out. Do this. I'm going to move a little bit quickly during this, but hopefully you can kind of keep track of where we're at, and you can always pause the screen if you need it. So the first thing that we are going to need to do is have it check if we're in the right position, as we move our pieces around. For instance, if we move the brain and it's touching the brain placement, something should happen. So the way that it's going to do that is I'm going to go to the brain over here on the left, and we have it already dragging to follow our finger, but we need to have it check when we release it and put it into a spot. So when we move our finger off the brain, it's going to check, am I in the right spot or not, and what's going to happen. So we're going to use this one right here called when brain touch up, when I touch up my finger off of it. So I'm going to drag that out, and we are going to then have it ask a question. So we're going to grab the second if then else block. So if my brain, I go back in here, and if I scroll down, there's this little purple box here, the second one, that it says if the brain is colliding with other. So if brain is colliding with other, and that other thing that it's checking for is if the brain is touching the brain placement dot. So if I go into the brain placement little code area over here, you're going to have to scroll all the way down to the very, very bottom in the green, but the very bottom one is a brain placement. So if brain is colliding with the brain placement, what should happen? Well, the brain should stop moving. It should lock into place, or basically turn off. If you think back to the last app that we did, we had that working with the germ sprite. The germ sprite turned off when we won or lost the game, and it stopped moving. So I'm going to go back into the brain, and if you remember, we said this set enabled block here. So we're going to set the brain enabled to false, meaning it is no longer enabled and it is turned off. All right? Otherwise, if I don't put the brain on the brain placement dot, I put it on any of the other incorrect spaces, then I need to move my brain back to its original spot and try again, right? So I'm going to go back to the brain, I'm going to go back to the purple and say, call the brain to move to a specific XY location. And in this case, the easiest way is if I just go back to the orange variables and go back to get, I want it to go back to the original brain X. I'll just duplicate this real quick and set this to original brain Y. So these numbers are referring back to these XY coordinates that we already put in earlier in the last video. So now if the brain's not in the right spot, it goes back to its original spot and you try again. Notice that I am turning it off here, right? So I'm going to need a way to turn it back on. So let's go ahead and figure that out while we're at it. So we need a reset button, or a way that we can reset all of our pieces so that they go back to their original spot after they're all locked in and I turn them back on. So we're going to grab a button and drag it up into your app. I don't really care where you put it. I'm just going to put it up above for now. That's fine. So right now I don't have anything in there. I'm going to rename this button so it's not just called button 1. I'm going to rename it to actually say reset so we can find it easier later. And also I need to change the text of the button, otherwise it just has that. So I'll just call this reset as well. So now I've got a reset button, and you can play with the options if you want to make it look different if you want. But in my reset, I need to code, tell it what to do. So if I go back into my blocks, there's a reset button now on the screen. Click that. And I need to tell it what it's going to do when I click that reset button. So pull this out. So let's just say my brain is in place. I've dragged it, it's locked into where it's supposed to be on that placement dot, and I'm ready to reset my game. I need that brain to go back to its original location, right? So I want my game to start over. I'm going to duplicate this by right-clicking it. Duplicate. I'm going to drag this over. A lot of this app is really nice because you can just build something once, and then you can just duplicate and make some changes. The other thing that is important is my brain is still set to off, technically. So I need for my brain enable to be true when I hit that reset button so that it starts my brain up again and it actually is able to be dragged again. Okay? So we now have a moving piece that will lock into place when I put it on the right dot. Obviously, I don't have the other 3 pieces made yet. We'll talk about that in a second. But one of the requirements that is listed in 1.8, if I can go back in and show you, is that you need some kind of score. So, right here in our requirements, it says give the user 1 point for every correct placement of the body on the body outline. Okay, so let's talk about that real quick. I'm going to show you something real quick. I added the code from the last app where we did the germ game. I added the stuff that we did with the score into my backpack. So if you need to, you could go back into your old project by going up into my projects up here, and you can go back into your last game and find the score code that you wrote. And same thing with the timer, by the way. You can see in my backpack up here, I added all these old scores that or these old codes that I added before. So if you want to add the timer again, go back to what the timer you made before and drag it in. Then I can just drag that out if I wanted to make a timer. But you can see here how I have this stuff about a score. So let me find here. I'm just going to grab this out of my backpack up here. You might have to remake this, and that's okay. But especially now that I'm showing it to you. But it's sometimes easy to just go to your backpack and pull out old code if you put it in there. So I pulled out this code from before about how to add a score. However, you'll see that there are little X's everywhere, meaning there are some errors happening. That is because I don't actually have a variable called score in my code yet. So what I need to do is if I go to the orange variables tab, I need to actually initialize or make a new variable called score. You can call it whatever you want, but it's handy if you just match this up so that way it knows that, oh, hey, I got something called score now. I'm going to go ahead and grab my math block and go and add a 0 right here so that my game starts at 0 points. Notice my little errors went away because I actually have this ready to go. But I'm still getting an error about a score label that I'm apparently missing. So if you remember from before, the label is actually the little text box on the top of your app that's showing the points. So if I need a label called score label, I'm going to go back to my designer. I'm going to go back over to my interface over here. I'm going to drag a label up into my app as well. Again, I would recommend calling this score label or whatever you had before. Again, you can always readjust this. If you want to call it something else, that's totally fine. But it's going to need to match up. And again, I want to change the text as well back to score. Okay. Back in my blocks, you'll see, it might take a second, but maybe. See, there it goes. So now it actually recognizes, oh, hey, you got something called a score label now. And if you called it something else, you should be able to go to the pull down menu and find whatever it's labeled. So now I've got this little thing that should work now. It's going to change my score +1, and it's going to update my label on my screen and show me, I guess I should probably put this to score because that's what I had my text say instead of points. Now, this is the code to add a point, right? So I want to add a point whenever I put the brain or whatever piece in the right spot. So now right here, when I put it on the brain placement, it's going to add a point. Okay. Under my reset button, I probably need a way that it's going to set my score back to 0 once I reset it. So I'm going to do set my global score back to 0. This is just making sure that when I start the game again, it's going to update the screen. And you should probably also, I'm going to duplicate this whole chunk here. I want my actual text label to switch back as well. So I got to make sure my text updates too, not just my number behind the scenes. Okay. One of the options, by the way, is you have 4 options that you have to include. Either take a point away if you put the wrong body part in, have a timer. I'm not going to get into the timer in this video, but you could theoretically get your timer from the last app and get that to work here. You could have a solution button. I'm not going to show you this one, but kind of the same way that we made a reset button that puts all the pieces back, you could make a solution button that puts all the pieces in their correct location. And then finally, you could have a pop-up text box that tells you what the body part is or does. And I'll show you that in a minute. But the one thing I wanted to show you, because now this should be about right for the brain to work. The nice part is I don't have to rebuild this whole thing from scratch now. If I wanted to get my respiratory system working now, I could right-click and duplicate this, and I can just change all of these pieces. So maybe when I'll do digestive system. Digestive system's touched up, I'm going to have to make sure I'm really careful about all of these. So now I'm saying the digestive system touches the digestive placement, set digestive system, enable, and then again, just got to make sure these all line up with what they're supposed to be. But this is a quick way that you can easily get your copies done. So now this is all ready to go. Again, I'd probably need to add a call digestive system to move to original. You know what I mean? So I'm just kind of duplicating and copying, and it's a little bit faster than just remaking all the blocks, right? So you're gonna have to do that for all 4 of your pieces. The one thing I wanted to show you real quick, because it's new, is this notifier right here. So this is one of those options. This is actually pretty easy. So this is one that it might be an easy choice for you if you're struggling to get something else to work. If you go back to your designer, this is a notifier over here, over in this user interface. I can just drag this into my app, and it's kind of a behind the scenes thing. It's not going to show up on your page. So it's in here. I'm going to go back to my blocks. And what that will do is it adds the ability to code this notifier over here. So I'm going to go over, and you got to think about when you want this pop-up to happen. I'm probably going to make it pop up when you put it in the right spot. So like when I put the brain in the brain placement, it's going to make a pop-up that says, like, what does the brain do? So I'm going to grab my little notifier over here. I'm going to click inside, and I'm going to go down to the purple where it says Show Alert Notice. This is just the one that we typically use for it to show like a pop-up menu or a pop-up text box on the screen. So call Notifier1 to show a notice, and we can tell it what we want it to do. So if I go to text and pull out this first box, I can say what I want it to pop up on the screen. So maybe if I want it to tell you what the body parts do, this is what you could do. So the brain is the computer of the body, or something like that, right? And I want it to tell me about the brain when I put it in the right spot. So if I go back and find my brain stuff, drag this over here. Let's say I want it to happen when I put it in the right spot. I can just drag this right up here. So when I put the brain with the brain placement, a little pop-up will show up on the screen that will read that message. So that's a very simple one you can do. You can make another new one for the other 3 parts as well. It explains what they are. But this is a nice way where you can make a specific message pop up on the screen at any point. Okay, so that should give you pretty much everything that you need to do. Obviously, there are a couple things in these extra requirements in here, or choices that I didn't talk about, but you might be able to figure out how to do the timer from before. But please make sure you're checking through all of these checkboxes and making sure that everything in your app works, and give it a test before you are ready. Good luck. Please feel free to, replay the video or pause it at any point. I'll kind of put my screen here for a minute that you can pause here, or look over here, and this is just duplicates. So good luck.